District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program.
Introducing Oakley Meta Vanguard, the new performance AI glasses designed for athletes. With hands-free capture on an action-ready ultra-wide camera, powerful open-ear speakers, and built-in Meta AI that syncs with your Garmin devices for real-time insights while you train. Take your performance to the next level with Oakley Meta Vanguard. Athletic intelligence is here. Learn more on meta.com.
Meet the computer you can talk to. With Copilot on Windows, working, creating, and collaborating is as easy as talking. Got writer's block? Share your screen with Copilot Vision to help spark inspiration, and use Copilot Voice to have a conversation and brainstorm ideas. Or maybe you need some tech help. With Copilot Vision, Copilot sees what you see. Let Copilot talk you through step-by-step guidance so you can master new apps, games, and skills faster. Try now at windows.com/Copilot.
Welcome to District of Conservation. I am your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. I'm heading to Hawaii this week to speak at University of Hawaii at Manoa about energy abundance. I'll preview my speech in this episode briefly, but I want to touch on this affordability narrative we're hearing, and also my return to the San Diego Zoo 13 years after I first visited, a place that I actually now kind of credit to lighting a fire for my interest in wildlife conservation, in addition to the fishing and national park visits in California, which exposed me to the great outdoors when I was born and raised there. I'll dive into these three topics very briefly for you all today. We're seeing this reframing of climate policies as being affordable in wake of the recent off-year elections in New York City, Virginia, and New Jersey, especially when it comes to energy issues. The two governor-elects, including my new incoming governor, Abigail Spanberger, campaigned on an affordability agenda with respect to energy. New Jersey is experiencing its worst electricity crisis, I think, in recent memory, due to net zero decarbonization policies, and Phil Murphy's successor, Mikey Sherrill, wants to perpetuate that by building up on the Energy Master Plan, which is the net zero agenda that the governor, soon to be exiting governor, implemented throughout his 8 years, but more formally adopted in 2019. And I'm not sure if the Jersey legislature has adopted it officially because they wanted to codify it right before he left, but I suspect that Governor-elect Sherrill will likely do it. She also wants to go even more extreme than Governor Murphy with declaring a state emergency on electricity, which even Governor Murphy on his way out said is not a smart idea. When Mikey Sherrill was a congresswoman and she's soon to leave office early in anticipation of her taking over as governor, she also, along with Abigail Spanberger, who is governor-elect of Virginia, my state, both of them were supporters of the Inflation Reduction Act. So this is why I'm skeptical of them proposing and implementing an affordability agenda. Spanberger's affordability plan was a little more appealing to me. She understands a little bit more than Sherrill, because Sherrill is really banking on solar. Solar has to be where New Jersey goes. She mentions nuclear a little, but I've read through her plans extensively. It seems like a double downing of offshore wind and solar, which are what have invited New Jersey's electricity crisis because of aging grids, premature power plant retirements. New Jersey has retired 6 power plants, 5 coal plants, 1 nuclear across the 8 years of Governor Phil Murphy's administration. Virginia has been in slightly better shape under Governor Youngkin. Spanberger says that her affordability plan includes new nuclear, including fission and fusion. Great, I love that. Geothermal, too. She says we have to keep existing natural gas, but she's very skeptical, I saw in an August 2025 interview, of adding new natural gas infrastructure, even though the consensus with the public sector, private sector, federal government is you have to have new natural gas infrastructure. So knowing what both of their plans are, and I can link to their plans so you can read for yourself. When I saw Governor Gavin Newsom of California bragging in Belém, Brazil, where COP30 is currently transpiring and happening, where he was bragging about being a climate leader in a increasingly skeptical of net zero world. New York Times, I'm going to continue continue to cite this piece, in September wrote that the world is souring on net zero climate policies. It's true here in the United States. It's also extending to Europe, Asia, South America, and other countries because they see the perceived benefits don't outweigh the negative costs that are expected. It's a $215 trillion price tag to decarbonize your economy for reducing at most 0.2 degrees Celsius instead of the 1.5 degree Celsius figure we keep hearing that the Paris Climate Accords will achieve. And a chart from Bjorn Lomborg actually found that net zero as a goal, if it was to be implemented effectively, the goal would not be reached until 2400, when we are all going to be dead. Knowing this reality that the onboarding of more solar, wind, EVs, and batteries has not led to cheaper prices, has raised energy insecurity, has risen prices, has risen electricity rates. It's hilarious and ironic to me that Newsom and these incoming governors of New Jersey and Virginia are bragging about delivering on affordability. We saw at the national level under 4 years of Biden and Harris policies, this mandate to go net zero by 2050, which was an executive order under the so-called Tackling the Climate Crisis executive order from January 2021, which said the U.S. economy, if we proceed here, is going to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050 economy-wide. The Trump administration repealed that executive order immediately upon entering office earlier this year, recognizing it will not produce that, and it comes with a lot of steep costs. California, I might add, has the second highest electricity rates in the country after Hawaii, and the most expensive gasoline prices, with 2 of the 9 remaining refineries expected to close down, which is why forecasters from University of Southern California have said that gasoline prices could go up to $8 a gallon next year if these 2 refineries are ultimately closed down and shuttered. That's why, I hate to say it, I'm unconvinced of these net zero policies being perpetuated and reducing prices. An energy abundance agenda, policies that kind of back up this philosophy I've been talking about. It's just a way to bring these, infuse different ideas of deregulation, innovation, being more market driven, having energy policies more reflective of consumer demand and not government demand or government directives. Energy abundance policies welcome reliable, abundant, secure energy sources. And as you multiply them, as you increase production, you'll naturally see prices go down because the Biden administration was deliberately depressing production. We've seen this in different reports that have just been published in the last few months that the deliberate depressing of natural gas production did stymie and put us behind. The exhausting of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is an emergency reserve, also did not help. Additionally, having the fewest offshore oil and gas leases also put us in a predicament of having our resources strained, even though we're sitting on billions upon billions of proven reserves, billions of cubic feet of proven reserves. I've argued, in addition to this scarcity mindset that comes with climate policies in the form of net zero decarbonization goals, that this overemphasis on solar, wind, EVs, and batteries really put us behind on supercharging nuclear, including fission and fusion. We're playing catch up. We pioneered this technology, and now we're having to play catch up, which is why the Trump administration has set a goal of deploying 400 gigawatts of new nuclear generation within the next few decades, which is a smart goal. You see geothermal getting a second look. You see the shoring up of, yes, coal and natural gas because they still have staying power in large parts of the country. You look at our energy mix, the energy breakdown, natural gas still is king. Coal is still pretty important across many parts of the country, and people are having to go back to coal when solar and wind don't work. That's the reality there. That's why I'm really optimistic about this energy abundance posture capturing on. I wrote a report on it, as you all know. Those of you who listen to the program, follow me on social media, you see that I am working alongside many in kind of the center-right energy space, conservation space to advance this and put this thinking out there to more people. It's not something new. I'm not reinventing the wheel. We're not reinventing the wheel. It is just to more concretely define policies against net zero, kind of contrast net zero. Energy abundance is a perfect antidote to that, in my opinion, which is why I'm going to Hawaii as we talk about this next subject. I want to preview my speech for those of you who won't be able to attend. I've never been to Hawaii in my 30 plus years of life. I lived on the West Coast my entire youth and into college before I moved to the East Coast when I was 21. We had nice beaches in California, so there was no reason for us to go to Hawaii as a family when I was growing up in California. And I've always been very intrigued by it, with the tropical feel, it being an island, having lots of outdoor opportunities. From a wildlife conservation standpoint, I'm very, very intrigued by the fact that they have so many axis deer and wild hogs that have run amok and need management. And if I had more time, I would do my part to help do management over there, but I don't. I only have a couple days in Hawaii. When I got the request from University of Hawaii Manoa's Turning Point USA group, I immediately jumped on and said, yes, we will make this possible. I will happily come to your state, to Honolulu, to come speak and talk about this issue. I will have some reflection on the speech with pictures, possibly some video after the fact, a few days later, because it is a 5-hour time zone difference from the East Coast. So I might be delayed in posting content there, but I'll post some behind the scenes on social media for those of you who are interested in following along. I will ask the group chapters if they plan to record it, maybe live stream it. That could be a possibility. I'm not sure if that's doable, but I will ask the group chapter leader if that is something that they can do. And why is bringing this energy abundance message so important to a place like Hawaii? As I alluded to a little earlier in this episode, Hawaii has the most expensive electricity prices in the country. It also was the first state to pledge to committing to net zero in 2015 when the legislature passed a bill to achieve carbon neutrality or go net zero by 2045, although the state has only met 31% of that goal. Even the university has pledged to go net zero, only reaching 12% of that goal, according to a new study from the university itself. Hawaii's location makes it tricky on the one hand too, in addition to kind of mismatched policies, because it is, of course, an archipelago. It's very segmented off from the continental United States, from the lower 48, of course, and they have to import a lot of resources, particularly petroleum, which is what they largely consume. About 70% of electricity generation in Hawaii is from petroleum. When you look at the Energy Information Administration's breakdown state profile, in particular of Hawaii, and how much they're consuming, what type of electricity are producing after petroleum, which is about 71 to 75%, is then solar, which is about 22%. In total, they say renewables accounts for 24% of net electricity generation, most of that being solar. A place like Hawaii does make sense for solar if it's done privately and not mandated, given that there's a lot of sunshine throughout the year. A little teaser for listeners. What I found from the University of Hawaii per a new study from August of this year, one of the report's co-authors, Nicole Lautzi, found that through producing this report, we found that solar, wind, and batteries on their own will not scale to meet the needs we have to go 100% renewable. They mentioned the addition of new nuclear. I think earlier this year, the state legislature was mulling over approving new nuclear, which would be great. I don't think Hawaii currently has any infrastructure for nuclear reactors, maybe on the military bases. I will double check and cross-reference there. But there's no better place to take this message to than Hawaii. Of course, their geography puts them in a precarious situation, but it also doesn't help that they've adopted a lot of renewable portfolio standards policies, net zero dictates, which is why you see, in addition to them having to import petroleum and still being heavily reliant on oil and gas, that even the renewables have not delivered for them as well. I normally don't get any opposition to my speeches. I don't think there will be any protesters. It's a largely academic speech that I deliver, but I always come prepared and ready to answer any questions. I love the dialogue and Q&A back and forth. I've done a lot of speeches over the years. I love back and forth. So if you're in Honolulu this week, November 18th, or you know someone, have family members, friends, interested people wanting to come to my speech, I've included details on room, location, and time. It's November 18th. 5 p.m. Hawaii Pacific time at the Hilton Hawaiian Village in Waikiki. I'll report back my findings and experience to you all next week when I return back to Virginia. I will also be visiting Pearl Harbor and a couple other landmarks that are public lands, some of the famous beaches. I'm very curious to see for myself the North Shore, in particular the Bonsai Pipeline. I don't surf, but I'm going to admire it from afar. So I can't wait to report my findings on my first visit to Hawaii, which will mark 48 of 50 states visited. Whoa. And I'm going to round out now today's quick overview of my time in San Diego. So I did a little workcation because I can work remotely as long as I don't have to be in DC for important meetings, congressional hearings, and the like. But I chose to work out of San Diego this last week. And while I was doing my work, I was trying to stay active, walking a lot, doing exercising, etc. And I used one of my occasions to exercise to go visit the San Diego Zoo. I grew up going to the San Diego Zoo. If you're someone who grew up in Southern California, it was pretty common to have memberships to go visit because it was a really exciting place. I actually much preferred the zoo to Disneyland. I lived about 30 minutes from Disneyland in Orange County, and I went there a couple times, but I was more excited to go to the zoo over Disneyland. I believe I did go to the zoo more than Disneyland, actually. If you've never been to the San Diego Zoo, it's located in Balboa Park, which is like the West Coast Central Park, if you need some context or a comparison. And to me, actually, I think I like it more than Central Park. It has the same kind of feel to it. There's a lot of walking you can do, but there are a lot more attractions and museums and other places you can explore. Central Park is different. It's lovely. I'm not knocking Central Park, but I've always been privy to go to Balboa Park and defend it and talk about it and marvel in it anytime I go there because there's so many museums, there are international houses, there's Japanese gardens, there's so much you can do there. Great food, lots of history. And if you don't know, the San Diego Zoo, for historical context, was born out of the 1915 Panama, California exhibition. It was established in 1868 as City Park and was later renamed in 1910 in honor of Vasco de Balboa. If you studied California history, you're a fellow Californian. San Diego is the oldest city in California in terms of settlement because it was discovered in the 1540s. I believe it was 1542, if I recall correctly. So named for Vasco de Balboa, Balboa Park. And at this Panama, California exhibition, there were lots of exotic animals. The leftover animals, instead of facing death or being culled, were then transferred to what would then become today's San Diego Zoo. Reading more about the history, which is very fascinating to me, some of the early pioneers of the zoo were doctors Harry Wedgeford, Paul Wedgeford, Fred Baker, Joseph C. Thompson, and naturalist Frank Stevens, who held their first organizational meeting in October of 1916. And apparently one of the first animals to live at the zoo was Caesar, a Kodiak bear. The San Diego Zoo pioneered open-air exhibits to recreate the wild settings that a lot of these exotic animals inhabited throughout the world, which is why you go to the zoo and you see, largely for the most part, uncovered exhibits that kind of recreate natural settings of the different places and ecosystems that these animals came from. And what was also interesting when I was reading through the history again of the zoo, San Diego Zoo actually had the first female zoo director, Belle Benchley. I encourage you to read the history for yourself. So it's had a century-long plus of existence. It's a beautifully manicured zoo. You get a lot of steps in, lots of different unique animals to see and look at. I didn't get to see any polar bears. I saw everything I wanted to except for the polar bears. They were not out there. But as I talked about earlier in the podcast, I think the zoo visits did kind of plant a seed for me years later that private conservation efforts can adequately supplement public land conservation efforts, and without the generous contributions of donors, philanthropists, and others, we can't have zoos. That's also something I think people kind of gloss over, or people have criticisms about zoos oppressing and treating animals very poorly. And if a zoo is not accredited with the American Zoological Association, that's where you can be suspicious and cast your aspersions about the credibility of zoos. But most of these well-known zoos tend to have the highest standards. They abide by conservation efforts. And I talked about this years ago when I visited the San Antonio Zoo and got to interview the CEO there. That was in 2021, and that's like many hundreds of episodes back in the podcast history if you want to check it out. What the CEO of the San Antonio Zoo told me privately, and this is something conveyed, I think, through many zoological societies and zoos, especially in Texas perhaps, but oftentimes you will find kind of interesting alliances between zoos and hunters. They face the same enemies, they face the same targeting, so of course they're going to have natural alliances there. I have my parents to thank for gifting me memberships throughout my childhood because it did set a precedent for wanting to be a conservationist. Who knew that that would happen? But it's such a great place, definitely very family friendly. And even if you don't have kids, you're not married, like it's a great place to go and explore, get your steps in, just to see what true conservation efforts from the private side of things look like, especially from the zoo perspective, because most kids would never know what these species are or look like unless they go visit Africa or go visit places in Europe or Antarctica or Asia or whatever. You aren't going to see these animals largely in the wild. You'll see grizzly bears in the wild. You'll see polar bears further north. You might see non-North American species on safari in Africa or on hunting trips in Europe, Asia, South America, and the like. Zoos are an educational setting. They have great standards. They've improved a lot since their inception. And I'm a firm believer that places like the San Diego Zoo really do set the standard high for private conservation efforts, in addition to the hunting and fishing stuff that I talk about on a regular basis here on the podcast. So I'm a big fan of the San Diego Zoo. It's a place I hold dearly in my heart. And if you find yourself in San Diego, please go. They did not pay me to say this. I don't have any relationship with them. This is just something I'm saying out of my own volition and own interest, that if you can frequent a zoo like this or visit a zoo like this, take the opportunity, give them your money. It's money well worth spent, and you're going to have a magical time. If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played, and also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day, and please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.